Welcome back, everybody. And if you have been here before, you haven't seen the update, well, now you've seen, we are now a mask optional campus for everybody, students and guests alike. So you're welcome to wear a mask or not wear a mask, however you like. So we're glad you're back. Thanks for coming. And here we are at another Green Living Seminar presentation. Elena Traster in the Environmental Studies Department here at MCLA. As many of you know by now, this semester's Green Living Seminar is organized around the theme, Greening the City. All of these presentations are always free and open to the public. They've been taking place this semester at 5:30 on Wednesdays here in room 121 of the Feigenbaum Center for Science and Innovation. You can find the schedule and links to recordings of prior presentations at www.mcla.edu/greenliving, one word. Our presentation tonight, again, will last for about 45 minutes and hold your questions. There'll be an opportunity for a question and answer session at the end. And a quick plug for next week's presentation on Wednesday, April 6th. Please come back and join us to hear a talk by Dr. Nathan Phillips, professor in the Boston University Department of Earth and Environment, speaking on carbon farming in urban and suburban areas. Today's presentation, Sustainable Forest Management and Natural Resource-Based Economic Development in Northwestern Massachusetts, the Mohawk Trail Woodlands Partnership, will be presented by Dr. Hank Art, Rosenburg Professor of Environmental Studies and Biology Emeritus at Williams College and Board Chair of the Mohawk Trail Woodlands Partnership. Thanks so much for coming tonight to tell us more about the partnership program.
Well, thank you, Elena. It's a privilege being here and a privilege being the first speaker in the series to do that. but I think you probably, we're all socially distanced appropriately, if not hyper socially distanced. And it's a pleasure being here. It's the first time I've been in this room, and it's a lovely place to talk about what might to you seem not to be very urban. Greening the urban environment. But we will end with a project that's from the Urban Forestry Division of the U.S. Forest Service to the Mohawk Trail Woodlands Partnership. So it will come full circle. So we'll start out around here. And I'd like to start out by actually talking and thinking about how we use forests and what forest means to us, and what forest products and forest management might mean. So at kind of one end of the spectrum, this is probably the approach to forests that most of us in this room share. Getting out Mount Greylock, hiking around, enjoying outdoor recreation. And that really is a forest product, and one which the Mohawk Trail Woodlands Partnership is very much concerned about, and we are, as you'll see in this talk, is something that we are trying to address to encourage the use of our landscapes in a sustainable fashion so they endure indefinitely into the future in perpetuity and are available to all, including future generations. And also can be used as economic drivers for economic development. So there's actually the benefits that the forest is providing can be monetized in some respect and raise the standard of living across this region. So here's one approach. Here's another approach, a photograph I took out of my windshield last fall going down around Field Park in Williamstown. And that's another aspect of forest management and forest products, and part of the story of what one of the things that the partnership is trying to do can be seen if you look at that license plate, and you probably can't read it from where you're sitting in this room, but it is from Quebec. And take a look at, if you drive up the Northway sometime, look at the logging trucks. Most of the full trucks are heading north, and the empty trucks are coming back in this direction. But the majority of what is cut in this region is not processed in this region. It is transferred to Canada and then goes all around the world. Some of it comes back here, but we buy a lot of timber from British Columbia and the Pacific Northwest, from tropical rainforests. And one of the things that we're trying to establish and promote is local wood, just like the local food movement. Consuming the local wood has a much smaller carbon footprint than taking wood, transferring it to Canada, processing it there, transporting it back, and going down to Home Depot or wherever and buying your wood. Another aspect of forest management might be seen on trucks around, and that's chips. Chips are quite controversial. We hope in the Woodlands partnership to avoid chips that are going into combusted uses, such as boilers and power plants. We would like to see those chips enduring, and if anything, going into other kinds of forest products. But chips are part of the forest management and forest use within the general region, and even today there was a hearing about this very subject of using wood for firing power plants. There was a hearing in which the majority of the public testifying were in opposition for very good reasons, and those are reasons that we share. So the use of forests is somewhat controversial in the region. We are using our forests less and less for timber. This is an example from Mass Forest, an organization that took exception and was opposed to having logging done in Windsor Jams State Park, which is within the Woodland Partnership geography. In actuality, this is a slide of a program that the state has of removing plantations that were established back in the 1930s by the Civilian Conservation Corps, and were almost entirely of Norway spruce. So it's an exotic species, it's not native. But clear cutting of our native forests is probably not a good management tool, and we're very much interested in promoting appropriate, sustainable forest management that doesn't reduce the carbon in the soil, which is one of the major problems with the way that clear cuttings typically operate within the region. So firewood, many people heat their homes with firewood within the region, and that is certainly something that we have an interest in, and having an interest in having that accomplished in a sustainable fashion. So the highest and best value of our forest is probably not firewood, but there is, in terms of appropriate forest management, there is a role for the use of our resources to produce firewood for people who heat their homes with wood rather than propane or natural gas or oil. Relatively few people with coal anymore, but fossil fuels will typically have a higher carbon footprint, certainly a higher carbon footprint than an appropriately managed forest system that might have firewood as a use for some of the lower value materials that are taken out. So here's another example of forest products within the region. This is the new extension, relatively new extension at Berkshire East Ski Area, the resort, made out of wood that was local, has furniture inside the pub here that is all made out of local material. So this is a wonderful example of local wood and something that we'd like to see more of rather than building using wood that's coming from a long, long distance away. So, and then finally, close to my home and my research in the past is the Hopkins Forest, where we have an old growth forest that is just doing an amazing job of sequestering carbon, taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and putting it into the soil in this old growth forest that is not virgin, in that we know that in the past there were some trees cut down or salvaged and removed from the site. But it has sugar maples that are 4 feet in diameter and 120 to 130 feet high. So it's a rather dramatic piece of real estate, and one that is an example of a functioning forest that has no internal disturbances from human activity, but certainly is being impacted by the environment from afar, even on a global scale. Okay, so here is the Mohawk Trail Woodland Partnership region. And it doesn't map onto anything. It is it's northwestern Massachusetts. It's northern Berkshire County, but not all of northern Berkshire County. It's western Franklin County, west of Greenfield. And it has a funny little piece that goes down into Peru. That's Berkshire County. But it has this really weird looking shape to it. But it is a public body. The Mohawk Trail Woodland Partnership is a public body that we're governed by the public laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We have open meetings. We have minutes of all of our committee meetings. We abide by conflict of interest laws and all the rest of that. And we'll get into that in a moment. But here it is, going all the way here. Greenfield is over here, and New York State, Vermont, and then Pittsfield's down below here. Lanesboro isn't in it. Hancock isn't in it, but conceivably they could be added in sometime in the future. So this land that we are extant on is land that has been used for 10,000 years or more, and which has had a forest-based economy for 10,000 years. And it is with gratitude and humility that we acknowledge that we are learning, speaking, working, and gathering on the ancestral homelands of the Mohican here, the Pecumtuck, and the Abenaki peoples, who are to our east, who are the indigenous peoples of this land. We pay honor and respect to their ancestors, past and present, as we commit to building a more inclusive and equitable space for all. And the partnership is trying to establish a relationship with the indigenous communities, both in Berkshire County and in Franklin County. It's a slow process, and but one which we feel that the indigenous knowledge is significant and something we should be paying attention to. So the goals of sustainable forest management, natural resource-based economic development in northwestern Massachusetts are to conserve and sustainably manage our forest working landscapes, to protect the forests from threats, to enhance public benefits from trees and forests. These are very lofty goals. And good luck to us in accomplishing this. We're a relatively young organization, but we are a passionate one at that. Encourage sustainable natural resource-based economic development. So not only we want to feel good about what we're doing and protect the forest, but we want to have the landscape actually valued and producing economic benefit. revitalize the regional forest-based economy, support sustainable ecotourism and recreation. So you can see that this is a big part of economic development. Ecotourism also is a big part of economic development, and we don't want these to be in conflict with each other. And then respond to climate change through sustainable forest management. And this would include the use of our forests for carbon sequestration. So do well by doing good in terms of encouraging a global response in atmospheric carbon. So the question is, why is this region so important for sustainable forest management and economic development from this landscape? And part of it is due, and here's the boundary in pink, is due to the topographic diversity of this region. And there isn't a day that goes by that I don't celebrate the topographic diversity. Mount Greylock, the highest point in the state, the Hoosick River leaving Williamstown at about 500 feet in elevation. I mean, just this enormous topographic diversity that is shown in this lovely GIS map. And it is a topography that is also interesting in that it has the part of the Hudson River drainage in Berkshire County. So Mount Greylock here, the Taconic Range, marble valleys on either side of Mount Greylock, the broad Berkshire Plateau, which is actually an extension of the Green Mountains. And then to the east, the Deerfield River drainage, which cuts through what's called the Vermont Piedmont and empties into the Connecticut River on the east. So we have two big watersheds, the Hudson and the Connecticut River. And we think of ourselves as operating on a watershed-wide basis. And we're actually on two watersheds. So it all goes in the Atlantic, but it's fascinating that there is this diversity of topography, diversity of aquatic systems that are interacting with the forests. And yet we are mostly in green over here. Let me just blow up the northwest corner here. And here again is our outline. We're mostly green. We have, we're right now right there in the red patch in Adams and North Adams, and then coming along to Williamstown. But that's the only red in the entire region. It's right here. So urban. We're having, we're greening. Here we are, the greening part, and here's the urban environment right there. So this forest that is here is also the region within the Commonwealth that is most diverse in terms of forests. It's where all this topography and elevation has come together and is produced dramatically different kinds of forests that are right here. And so within a 10-minute drive, you can go from a boreal forest here, the spruce fir first spruce fir forest up on top of Mount Greylock, or you could get to a transition forest here, which is oak and hickory, or you can get into this brown, which is the northern hardwood kind of forest. So these labels might not mean all that much to you. I mean, they're convenient labels that people have given to forest types, but just let's take a look at what these look like, and maybe you've been to some of these places. So up at the top of Mount Greylock, spruce and fir, and red spruce going down into the hopper and some old growth forest that was way too steep topography to ever be cut. And then up on top of the Berkshire Plateau, and up north in the Green Mountains, you also have a lot of spruce and fir. And it is an evergreen forest. Here's a photograph taken in late April, early May. And the deciduous forests that interact with the spruce fir forest don't have their leaves yet, although you can see Adams is nice and green down below in the valley. The northern hardwood forest, which tends to be on the the eastern facing slopes and the northern facing slopes at mid elevation, sugar maple, yellow birch, beech, black cherry, just a real diverse kind of forest in contrast to the spruce fir forest. It's widespread across the region on both sides of the Berkshire Plateau. This is the Mohawk Trail State Forest over here in Charlemont. Here, this is part of forest in Williamstown. I'm not quite sure where that photograph was taken. But a sugar maple, beech, and yellow birch are the dominant species, along with a lot of others. This is in the Hopkins Forest with a beech stand. Deciduous, so it's light in the winter through mid-spring, and then we have about 5 months of leaves on the trees, 5.5 if we're lucky, and then they fall off and it becomes light again during the cold season. Then we also have an oak hickory kind of forest that is on the south-facing slopes and the west-facing slopes. So here's an entire side of Pine Cobble or East Mountain that stretches from Williamstown, Clarksburg into North Adams. And that is kind of hickory and oak species that are much more southerly in their distribution. So in a way, if the climate is changing, we're so lucky to have this mix of species that can respond and increase in response to climate change. So here's a close-up of oaks and hickories. They tend not to turn brilliant colors in the autumn, but sometimes retain their leaves late in into November. So this area up here in the northwest corner, this is a map from a Biomap, which is a statewide effort to map ecologically critical landscapes. And you can see that the density over here in the Mohawk Trail Woodlands region is quite high. It's very little white, which is kind of uninteresting ecological, here's Boston, if you want to talk about uninteresting ecological areas. We are really blessed in Berkshire County, and especially in Western Franklin and Northern Berkshire, in terms of having a lot of ecologically important, diverse landscapes. And the state has designated prime forest lands. And again, we are in one of the most densely covered, biologically important regions within the Commonwealth. So these are all reasons why this is an important geographic area for a woodlands partnership that would try to get sustainable forest management and economic development. It is also the corner of the state that has the probably the lowest per capita income, is economically stressed, and that has increased over time with the disappearance of the mills and within our region, the disappearance of Sprague Electric and GE as major employers within the region. So the economic development part is important. We are also, coupled with that, blessed by having a disproportionate amount of the old growth forest for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is contained in the partnership geography. There's estimated to be only 550 or so acres of old growth forest in the entire state. Our region within the partnership geography has 339 acres, which represents 62% of all of the old growth in the state is right here in this northwest corner. So this is something that we need to be cognizant of and be aware of and celebrate and also try to protect. So if one looks at the forest area of the entire Commonwealth, Massachusetts, 1750, this is the acreage over here, and it was 4 million, just shy of 4 million acres that were forested within the state. And by 1870, it had dropped down to somewhere around 1,500,000 acres. And this was due to agricultural clearing primarily. So farming was what everybody did, and used wood as building materials and fuel and other forest products. And then there was a phase after, right around the Civil War and after, of agricultural abandonment across the state. And the forests regrew, succession. The forest reclaimed the land. And that lasted until the mid-1960s or so. And then we have a clearing of forested lands for what we're loosely calling development. I'm not quite sure whether it's a good development or a bad development. Just parenthetically, this agricultural clearing, they used to call cleared land improved land. So, I mean, improved meaning that they could grow their crops on it. It was an improvement. Now, I'm not sure whether we call just cleared land an improved or an unimproved or lack of improvement. So this area is diverse. It has a lot of important ecological landscapes in it. It has a lot of, relatively speaking, a lot of old growth on inaccessible sites. But it also has a major trail system running through it in terms of outdoor recreation. Particularly western Franklin County is becoming a hub for outdoor activities that use nature and hopefully use nature in a sustainable fashion, both in terms of rafting and mountain biking and hiking. We have a lot of state forested lands and reservations and state parks within the region. So here we are. And this is all the state land that is protected, meaning the state has ownership of it and control that it won't be necessarily cleared. And then there's the question of how much of that should be forested and in what ways. We also have these wonderful forests that we have are vulnerable to various kinds of threats. And here is an assessment that came out of a whole group of people working together on a project on forest vulnerability, looking at all sorts of threats ranging from insect outbreaks to fire to weather threats. And the red is extremely vulnerable. And the green is low vulnerability. Well, look around the eastern part of Massachusetts. There's not much forest there and not as much threat as here in the Mohawk Trail Woodlands Partnership region. And this northern forest is entirely vulnerable to climate change threats. So the spruce fir forest is the one that is probably going to have the major impacts are going to be felt first in that kind of forest, and then a little bit later on in the northern hardwoods, and then in the transition oak hickory kinds of forests. So there are problems here that we need to address and need to be quick about it. And so one of the thoughts was maybe we should have a national forest in Massachusetts, being one of the very few states in the nation that doesn't have a national forest in it. Our neighbors in Vermont and New Hampshire have national forests, so why don't Massachusetts have it? So it was proposed that we have a national forest, and they went around shopping it around to various public hearings, and that was not a popular option. People were very hostile to the thought of federal land ownership within our region, taking it off tax rolls and probably for some other political reasons as well. So that was a non-starter. And we looked at, in the early 2000s at that, and then a typical national forest designation wasn't on the boards. So it came up with another process of having, rather than a top-down, some sort of bottom-up, we can't call it grassroots, but a tree roots approach to it, in which the municipalities within the region would be in the driver's seat. And it would be at no cost to the municipalities. They did not have to pay to join. The new public body was going to be formed that included 21 towns, potentially, if they wanted to opt in, and other organizations, public bodies, agencies, governmental agencies, private nonprofits that had a shared vision of wanting to have sustainable forest management within the area. So the Forest Service thought, and the Forest Service was involved in this whole process, they came up with the idea, or actually the collective of this Mohawk Trail Woodlands Partnership Advisory Committee, which started back in about 2013, came up with the idea that it would be wonderful to have purchased forest conservation restrictions for people, private owners, who wanted to manage their forests in a certified, sustainable fashion in perpetuity, which in this case is 50 to 100 years. So it's, as far as any individual, it's going to be perpetual because it would go with the deed and right on. So the idea was to have a special designation of this region and enable it to purchase the development rights, in effect, from a landowner. They would be compensated for those development rights. And the trade-off was that they would then have to manage their forested lands in accordance to principles in which it was sustainable. The carbon balance would be positive constantly. There'd be more carbon taken out than removed in forest products of various sorts. And so that's kind of the basic theme of this organization. So the Mohawk Trail Woodlands Partnership was established in 2018. The initial legislation was in August, and then finally amendments and signing occurred on Halloween of 2018, which established this as a law on the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and you can look it up. Here it is, House number 4835, in which it's a rather lengthy bill, but it outlines what the partnership can do. And the partnership is a collaboration of these 21 towns. And the point is that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the U.S. Forest Service are acting together to provide resources for this partnership to function and do what was outlined in the law as these various goals of the partnership. So in the following year, it took a year to get the chief of the Forest Service and the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs together in the room over at Berkshire East, appropriately. You know, here's all this native local material. And they signed a shared stewardship framework, which was a kumbaya moment in which everybody joined hands and said, we're going to actually get this thing off the ground and establish not an advisory committee, but the Mohawk Trail Woodland Partnership Board, which is empowered and mandated to promote sustainable forest practices as an economic driver for the region. So here is Secretary Theohardis, and Vicki Christensen, who is the chief of the U.S. Forest Service, together signing the document. A lot of hoopla. So the composition of the partnership, all these communities that have red stars have voted in, either at a town meeting or by a city council or a select board, have voted in for membership. There are only 4 municipalities at the moment that are not in the partnership, and those are Florida, Savoy, Coleraine, and Buckland. And they haven't voted not to join, they just haven't voted to join. So the invitation is still out. If anybody is out there who lives in any of these towns and would like to be an agent for having the town join us, the invitation is open. But additional organizations, we have the regional planning commissions, we have watershed associations in both sides of the Berkshire Plateau in both counties. We have economic development agencies, Lever from North Adams, and the Franklin County Community Development Corporation from the Franklin County side. We have land trusts. We have the Franklin Land Trust and the Berkshire Natural Resources Council. We have also members that represent the foresters within the region. We have the Massachusetts Forestry Alliance and the Society of American Foresters have representatives on the board, as well as 2 members of the faculty at UMass representing natural resources and public health, and a representative from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. We're supposed to have a representative from the U.S. Forest Service on the board. But little did we know when we were getting this going that it will actually require a literal act of Congress to enable the Forest Service to appoint an official board member to the board. And we don't have time to go into why that is the case, but we do have a liaison from the Forest Service. We actually have several liaisons. They've been very active, but they have not been voting members, and this is something that we would like to accomplish. So we do divide ourselves into standing committees, and it's within our standing committees that we're getting a lot of the work done. We have a standing committee on financing and budgeting of the partnership. We have one that's dealing with forest land conservation issues, of both educationally promoting those as well as working out the details of how will we eventually, when we have funding, be able to purchase these forest conservation restrictions. A group on natural resource-based economic development, of developing programs for how can we have better ecotourism, have better forest logging and forest management practices, and how can we have various towns dealing with using their forest lands for carbon sequestration and entering carbon offset markets. And then a group that's dedicated to education, outreach, and research. They've been sponsoring public fora and events, which to date have been all remote. And then one on municipal financial sustainability, of looking at the payment in lieu of taxes that are associated with the forested lands within our region and advocating for more equitable and a larger compensation for the municipalities for providing services that are benefiting everybody in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So those are our 5 standing committees. They meet every couple of months, and they're really doing wonderful work. And part of the work that we're doing as an organization right now is updating a plan that was put forward as a draft. It never was an official plan, but it was a draft in 2015 prior to our actual legal establishment. It was back with the advisory committee. And the the standing committees are all involved in revising that plan. And the plan, unfortunately, mentions things like wood pellets and pellet factories and wood chips for combustion, which the law that established the board said, no, you cannot do that. It specifically says we cannot fund and advocate pellets and chips for electrical generation or combustion heating. So we're coming up with the new plan. It is now in draft. It will be available probably next week, at which time we're going to be soliciting public comment on the new plan, which will deal with a whole range of elements, which I'll share with you in a moment. And on the little handout that you have is the web address for the Mohawk Trail Woodlands Partnership.org. It probably should be .gov since we're a public body, but we have .org. And we have all of the minutes of our meetings and all sorts of other information that's accessible at that website. So please do go and visit it. And as you'll see, we have a lot of information that we want the public to know about. And that's why we created this education, outreach, and research standing committee to help with that process. So the new plan will have these elements outlined with programs that are aspirational, that pending funding, we would like to see emphases placed on sustainable working forests, economic development and jobs, market for low-grade wood that is coming out of either the harvesting of invasive exotic species or trees that are diseased, or trees such as our white ash that are increasingly subjected to emerald ash borer and killed. So dead trees that are coming out, to get them into markets that will use this material and not have it necessarily just burned, but actually be used in various kinds of durable uses. Carbon sequestration, and many of the towns within the region have moved in that direction. Manufacturing of wood products locally rather than shipping our wood somewhere else and having the manufacturing done elsewhere. Forest-based tourism, that seems to have strong legs already, but we need to make sure that it's done in a sustainable fashion. Habitat protection, biodiversity protection of all the organisms that are out there, and then this forest conservation restriction program that we would like to establish. And then in the future, the thought was we would have a physical Mohawk Trail Forest Center. This may come in virtual form very, very soon. Within the next several years, we may have a website that will be a virtual forest center providing information. But we would like to actually have I won't say bricks and mortar, but I'd say a forest wooden structure, maybe manufactured wood, that will be located within the geography, that would serve as an information center, would serve as a interface for ecotourists, would serve as an interface for local landowners who have forests that would like to manage the land in a sustainable fashion, and to take a step in that direction. Last fall, a group of Williams College students actually did a preliminary study on a kind of design elements for what would go into such a center, and that too is available. That report is available at the Mohawk Trail Woodlands Partnership.org website. So they came up with all sorts of different things that could happen, public gathering spaces for people to give presentations to the public on sustainable forest management and use, a gift shop that would feature local wood-made products, so it'd be kind of like a marketplace, all sorts of ideas, but these are ideas at this point. There's no physical location that's been selected, and we have not designed a building, but at least there's we could use this fall 2021 report as the next stage in trying to develop this sometime within the next decade or so. So the first 3 years, a lot of what we've done and accomplished, and we've accomplished almost $1 million worth of grants that have come from monies from the Forest Service and from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs that have gone directly to 29 towns. So there are some towns that have had multiple grants over this 3-year period. And these projects have been trails, forest conservation, education, planning, stewardship, carbon markets, urban forestry, $20,000 maximum per town, but there have also been some aggregated grants for the entire region that have been $60,000 grants, and then within this time period, $120,000 from the U.S. Forest Service for various projects. So a group of, and we'd like to link the partnership with the educational institutions within the geography, so MCLA and Williams College, and we're hopefully going to expand it even outside to pick up the community colleges at BCC and Greenfield Community College, and have opportunities for students actually doing research with the partnership. And it started, the first project was actually fall of 2019 of 4 Williams College students in an environmental planning class doing a project called Can Money Grow on Trees, the use of town forestry land for producing carbon offsets rather than having the trees cut and removed from the site the way that they have been used for the last 150 years or so. And they produced a plan that was then implemented by hiring the Bay State Forestry Service to actually go out and evaluate several different woodlots that the town owns, and how would these be managed for carbon sequestration. So the next step will be the town of Williamstown actually implementing those measures, getting certified, and then going into carbon offset markets. And here are some of the current ones, and this is probably too small, and this is too much information on a small PowerPoint slide. I apologize. I tell my students never to do that, but here we are. Some of you might be able to read construction of a recycling center in Ashfield, installation of signage relating to rafting in Charlemont, acquisition of an all-terrain vehicle for four-season rescue on state and other open spaces in Hawley. So this has to do with municipal vulnerability. We want this as an economic driver, but if you bring more people in using these remote areas, you're going to have to increase the infrastructure in the towns. You have to increase the ability of rescue to get them. You have to increase the amount of trash collection. I mean, there are all sorts of externalities that we don't want the towns to have to bear by themselves. So there are grants that we've been giving to do this. A regional trail network. So in Heath, New Ashford, and North Adams, monies that have gone into helping design or construct trail systems to encourage sustainable ecotourism and outdoor activity. Completion of gravel road improvements to allow access to a mass wildlife property in Peru. So again, infrastructure needs to be improved. And then in row, a climate forest plan to implement on town forest lands. So all of those have been going. One of the projects that I've been involved in is urban forestry. Here we go, greening the urban environment. We have suffered an incredible loss due to various maple diseases and the emerald ash borer on shade trees along Main Street, Route 2 in Williamstown. So we applied for a grant to actually replace those diseased trees, and some of the trees have already been cut down, with new planting stock. So we got a $20,000 grant from the program to actually do that in the spring. These trees will be put in. Not as big as the trees that left, but give it time. In 100 years, it's just going to be marvelous. So none of us will see that, but it will happen. And then finally, the last kind of hot off the press, and actually the report will be maybe later this week, maybe Friday, or maybe next Monday, actually up on our website, is a combined Forest Service and Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs urban forestry project. This is the closing. Urban forestry project grant to the partnership as a whole. And we do have urban interfaces in certain areas here. And urban is based upon low economic per capita income, as well as actual urbanized areas, as you can see in the dark red, that will repair floodplain forests that have been diminished in their ecological ability to do what floodplain forests do. And this winter, we've been working in the Deerfield River Valley with a group of students from the Conway School of Landscape Design. Next year, we'll be working in the Hoosick River Valley, applying the template that they developed this past winter for the Deerfield, Connecticut section. And this is their report, A Place for Trees, Repair and Restoration in the Deerfield River Watershed. And next year, stay tuned, it will migrate to the Hoosick, and there's money in the grant, which is $120,000, to actually plant trees according to the program that these students have developed. In association, they've been working with the watershed associations and with the U.S. Forest Service in coming up with their methodology, which is right out there in black and white in color. And then finally, some of the economic development things that we've been doing is something called the Mohawk Trail Entrepreneur Challenge, which last year, Patrick and Katie Banks, who are developing an ecotourism camping site in Charlemont called Foolhardy Hill, along with 4 other ecotourism businesses, competed with each other for a prize. And I'm blanking out on the exact amount of the prize, but it's something like $25,000 that they could use. And in the process of the competition, they got advice from Lever on how to develop a business plan and how to be sustainable and how to market themselves. And Foolhardy Hill won it. And then this year, the challenge is ongoing right now as we speak, and will have its big announcement event in a month, on the 27th of April. And will deal with sustainable wood and forest products businesses. So, and then maybe the next one will deal with, carbon sequestration and municipal marketing of that. We're not sure. But Lever is part of our organization, and these have really had a wonderful impact. The people who didn't win the grant still got all the services of helping to develop a business plan and comply with the kinds of goals that the partnership has put forward. So let me end there. That was a little bit more than 45 minutes. I'm sorry. And see if there are any questions from the audience.